Hello again, everyone. Andrew here. Welcome back to part 6 of the Mystery of the Bevel Blocks. If you have not already, please check out the earlier episodes, as I will be building upon concepts brought up in those videos. Now, I want to jump right in it. Today, we've got a lot of interesting sites coming up, so I want to try to show you all as many of those as possible. But I do want to give a little bit more attention to the Acropolis before we move on. This is the inner wall of the erosion, and I wanted to point out some things that I had noticed that you guys might find interesting. So right away we see bevel blocks, nub blocks on bevel blocks, just like in some of the other areas of the Acropolis. Now we see it's pretty well preserved in the lower areas, some anomalous weathering, and looks like some substructure that perhaps may be bevel block behind some more crude construction. So this may go down farther. These elements, they almost look like timbers. I'm not sure. They might be rock. These may have been where metal clamps were attached. So we may be looking at a stone foundation that may extend further down. Now, I wanted to point out some color variations here. I'm sure you guys see them already. Now, I'm going to have to assume that all the white stones are repairs and that they are plastered, especially here. And let me let my zoom box go away. That area on the right where there's a diagonal striation, I find that really interesting, and you know, the well-preserved nature of these lighter stones. Interesting square hole in the darker stone above. But the general haphazard nature of this wall is very interesting, and it's calling into question the authenticity of this wall. Now, if they were to repair it in recent times with plastered blocks, it's odd that they left most of them unrepaired, unless that repair has fallen off. I'm not sure. It looks to be like carved stone that was fitted in, perhaps with mortar, but that would be a similar technique to the way the Parthenon was restored. They would do casts, or they would do measurements of the eroded blocks, and they would fit new blocks to the eroded surfaces so that they mated perfectly. And I'm really confused by some of this. It seems like some of it was unnecessary, and other parts, maybe, yeah, I could see why they would want to repair parts of it. But it's very interesting to me, the color variations in the stones and where they're all at. The heavily eroded darker parts. Here we see square holes that more than likely, just like, this is almost just like a Baalbek. You have a doorway, and there's going to be a cornice that was attached up here. So this is a decorative element. So perhaps portions of this wall is original. Oh, two more square holes. Very interesting there. Perhaps one in the flanking stone. Square hole here maybe. So this wall is just very interesting to me. I don't fully understand the datings. Of course, I'm trying to ignore datings, but we can tell that there are two different qualities of stones here, two different levels of preservation. Very interesting. I'm kind of puzzled by this wall. Let's move on, though. Aha. Still in Greece, Temple of Apollo at Didyma. And these two guys, happy to show us that indeed these are bevel blocks. These are nubs. This is very crudely constructed, but you can see the bevels. They exist. And here, different finishes of stone, and it's going to be in association with all the finely dressed but dry laid stones. Is this trapezoidal? Maybe slightly, but many elements of this structure are very curious to me, especially these lower blocks. That's a nub. Oh, those may be nubs. And these old cornices laying here. We see old cornices laying around at almost every one of these sites. We see them at Baalbek. We saw them at that amphitheater in Andriaki. These seem to fall out. And do they fall out of upper elements, square holes, or even, what are they, pediments? Sorry, I don't know the official terms. I have to grab my book, but just basically the lintels, the decorative lintel portions of the upper structure. We seem to see these just laying around at all the sites, almost like a similar fate befell all the sites. So I'm not sure. Again, you could see portions of the structure that are clearly stone mortar and rubble. This is clearly a reconstruction, repair effort. You could see the lower elements and the superior quality. You could see where maybe some damage happened here and here. So maybe some of these are square holes. Interesting, right? At the corners. Now, there is also, I must bring up that certain stones, if they are not carved perfectly, and over time, if the load on the structure is pushed on the corner of a block, it will chip off like this under pressure. I'm sure there's a term for it, but if the surfaces are not perfectly flat, the mating surfaces, say you have a lip of rock just on this corner, and you stack them all up over time, the weight will force the little corner to chip off. So in some of these cases, we may be seeing a natural phenomenon. See here, for example, maybe this crack, this block wasn't perfect maybe, these blocks weren't perfect, but it's very interesting that we also see more geometric, like really square. These are definitely not like these. These could be natural imperfections in the stone. These are not. These are something else. This might not. This might be something else. So I still have no idea on these square holes, guys, because some of them could be in lifting, in spots for lifting, but other ones maybe not. So we can't rule out all possibilities at this point. We're still too early on in these investigations. So this site, very interesting, very old, big blocks in the front and in the bottom. Kind of a similar feel as Baalbek. Very impressive columns. These were probably pretty big. And maybe do we see some over here that, yes, we see some that are not fluted. They just have the ionic capitals on them. That's interesting. And then, that's a nub. And then over here, the very nice fluted all the way down Ionic style capitals and columns. So I'm not quite sure the authenticity of the site. Like I said, most of these can be reworked over time, but we are seeing hallmarks again. Maybe that's a nub too. All right, let's move on. There's lots to see. Another angle. We'll go to this real quick because this is a good picture. I like this one. Again, upper elements, artistic motifs, and bam. These are undeniably bevel blocks. These have nubs, 2. Why would it have 2 if this one only needed 1? Certain questions arise just because of the anomalous configuration of some of these. There's 1 nub on the end. Some of these features have holes. These cornices are of a similar style to the ones at Andriaki, like we saw at the granary. Again, lots of this structure is missing. This lower stone also appears to be darker. And of course, this marble, this is probably a basalt, maybe some kind of igneous stone, I'm not sure. I only took Geology 101. These might be nubs over here, maybe there. So yes, the hallmarks are here. Very nice, clean lines on things too, we notice. So anyway, moving on. And now we start to get a little conspiratorial. We are in Rome, and we see classical Ionic styles. But what do we see at the bottom? These are bevel blocks. Definitely here, here. You can see them. Some of these other ones, the bevels are very fine, and they're hard to point out and hard to spot. Some of this foliage may be growing in square holes. There doesn't appear to be any visible. This portion obviously had to be repaired with fill. Seems like they could have just put a few blocks in here. That's pretty pathetic repair attempt, if you don't mind me saying. The columns. How about these columns? One piece. This one 2 piece maybe. If that is a seam, that's probably a seam. So very impressive columns. Very impressive upper elements. We see clamps. Restoration efforts here, here, here. Brick upper elements. Very odd, right? That is very out of place. Interesting. So yes, we are starting to see hallmarks in Italy. Now, one more. This one's good. Nice high contrast. So, not as much detail, but high contrast, so you can see the tight fitment and the irregularity of all the stones, perhaps nubs, and how far down it goes. Look at that. And then, of course, all the brick. You know, I mean, it's clear as day, the later brick, even here. That's a little bit better repair effort than that, I'd say. But still, there are things going on. And think about this, guys. Was this once an arched piece over a square lintel? And is that even, maybe even trapezoidal? But again, these could be echoing hallmarks from these other anomalies that we're just beginning to spot. Okay, we're going to stop here because next one we are going to get pretty controversial. Okay, guys, just for historical reference, the Parthenon was supposedly built by Ictinus and Callicrates, and the Colosseum was commissioned by Vespasian. Now, this is going to get pretty controversial, but we can't deny the hallmarks. They're there. It's a nub block. Now these are bands holding it all together, right? So look past those and look at all these heavily eroded areas. This could have been a cornice, right? If they were in a row, if these were originally square, maybe not. You can see the upper brick elements. This was obviously added later to, and then was this concrete, the poor quality concrete added on top just to expand the structure. But what I'm going to propose in the next few photos is that this lighter stone, this heavily eroded stone, is the remnants of the original structure. Now, you can see the little cornices again that wrap around. We saw those at some of the aqueducts, or at least one of the aqueducts so far, and we saw it at the granary of Andriaki. These these holes are very eroded, even though they're inside. That's interesting to think about, right? Because these should be shielded from most of the elements, and yet they're really heavily eroded, just like most of the others. We see anomalous little square holes in this block, and these other little square holes. And when we go inside in a minute, we're going to see a lot more of these anomalous little square holes in the stones. These are pretty interesting. Maybe here, maybe that, maybe this. So this portion is very, very old and is having to be held together with bands, and it was probably bricked to help support it in antiquity as well. So let's look at some more pictures here. Sorry again about the dog sounds. She's snoring pretty loud this morning. So here we are inside. Now, I love whoever took this photo, because whether they meant to or not, they really showed us some anomalous stones. Now, these have perhaps have some sort of bevel on them, but they just look like finely dressed stones to me. But all these little square holes are weird. Now, some of these, you think lanterns and other decorative elements, and even functional metal elements could have been inserted into these, and even wooden elements, pegs, just all sorts of things. These could have been used for a variety of purposes over a long period of time. But I do find that some of the more square ones that are just that kind of echo what we've been talking about so far, I find some of these are really strange. And we see more of this same stone and how heavily eroded it is. And then you kind of look to the background and you see how much of that is all brick, and some of them are flanking like smaller stones and perhaps mortar. We'll get to those in a minute. There we go. This is a large photo. So you can see where the original construction ended. These bevel blocks here, square hole. And it's almost, we don't necessarily know what the top of this structure looked like. I can assume this was supposed to be an arch, as this one was down here. But like some of these upper elements, are we for certain that this is what the original builders intended for it to look like? And even these elements here, these artistic elements, you can tell they're not in line with the original structure. This is all pretty stark and plain, and it's only the geometry that it is really being shown off. And just, again, look at all these holes. This isn't really, this isn't damage from projectiles from rifle fire or even catapults or anything like that. This is just weird erosion in between the stones. This is something different altogether. And this row of holes might be cornice that wrapped around. That's interesting. So I find the erosion really weird on some of these sites, and we're going to see some more of these holes as well in this kind of condition. And it's just, I can't fathom what forces are being put on these stones to cause them to do that, other than outgassing. Like there was metal clamps in there, and this structure got super hot, and all the metal had to get out of that stone, and it was forced out through the cracks and made holes. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't know of any other process that would cause these holes. And like I said, you can go watch Vlad9VT's recent video on the metal clamps, and you'll see a lot of these sites that have bevel blocks or finely dressed dry laid stones have these metal clamps. And I want to propose that in antiquity, the metal in those structures was valuable. So what would, like say, an invading army that didn't care about the site, what would they do? They would dismantle the structure to get the metal out of it. How many axes and daggers and metal implements in the museums are actually originally metal clamps out of these original structures. You know, stuff like that. It just really makes you wonder. So here, again, let's zoom in a little bit. I'm not sure of the quality of this photo, but that's pretty good. But you can see it's the entire structure that has these holes. I mean, some portions maybe not. This looks pretty good, the arch part. Maybe that's later. We don't know. I mean, that looks pretty good condition. I'd say that's original. But all these other holes, they're very anomalous. And you can clearly see the brick addition. So only this little portion was original. Very interesting to me. Okay. Aha, this is an interesting one to point out. I'm not exactly sure what building this is, but this is also in Rome. It's a very large photo. But that's good because I need to zoom in. These are bevel blocks. And you can see the square hole anomalies. And you can see the brick additions over them, and the columns that are just like the Temple of Saturn. And you can see that obviously this brick construction in the back is a complete departure from everything we've seen so far. It's a really, you know, it's nice, but it's a complete departure. The brick, the way it curves in, it's interesting. This is kind of a original looking element, sacred geometry type motif. But anyway, one of the more peculiar things I wanted to point out is this guy right in the front. And what is this square hole about, right? Now, some of these columns I see like this. They have just square indentations in them. Some of them are very shallow. And I'm just like, what's going in there? Is that a little piece of a cornice, like a decoration? Or is this like a sign of the processing? Again, I don't understand. Some of these surfaces might be really well planed. And I'm going to point out in the future that we're going to see a lot of square holes on the top of these columns. Perhaps in that scenario, there were like pegs that were connecting the columns and that kept them locked together. That's an interesting, you know, concept. I'll propose that a little later. But yeah, some of these older stones, these foundation stones, and then these are obviously upper elements. These I don't know the formal name, guys. I'm sorry, I have to pull out the book, but it's the underneath part of the overhang. These are the decorative ceiling elements that make up like the little underside of the awning around the perimeter of the building. You see those as well at Baalbek. So yeah, those should be up around here, kind of as a ceiling. So why are they all down here? But there may be other structures in the background, other things I don't know about, haven't been there. But we need to move on. This one, where is this? Where do you think this is? Bam, back to France. And this is classically Roman, or you would attribute it to Romans. But what do we see? We see nice striations, we see definite bevel blocks, heavy erosion, square holes. The bottom, I guess, is a basalt, right? But this is maybe a limestone or sandstone. It's a lighter, so it might erode easier. But then again, up here, look at this. A square anomaly. That's an indentation. That's not a hole. Nothing could be attached to that. What is that about? And is this a small filler stone at a corner? Again, what is that about? Why did they choose to put it in there? And then you look over here, guys, and boom, all these square holes. What are these? Are these architectural, decorative? What are they? What's going on here? Are these scaffoldings for when it was constructed? Did they attach it to build the structure? You see maybe little nubs on some of these blocks. These striations, look at those. Those are very uniform, and they look sweeping like a large, like circular motion. Very eroded down at the bottom. Some other erosion anomalies in the hole, like holes in the stones. So this structure has a lot more going on than you would think. This aqueduct. Now, obviously, we see some elements that stick out like this. This is what I'm proposing in some of the scenarios. But if you notice, this is actually how the block was carved. This is one piece. This is just like this, but more carved. And in this scenario, it has broken away. I believe we saw that in some previous sites. Very interesting different margins here, right? This is a wide margin, this is a wide margin. These are very narrow margins. I'm not sure if I saw any polygonal elements, but some of those might fit together in a polygonal fashion. And it's just, oh yeah, like here's a perfect example. You can see the, first of all, the square hole. What's that about? Which, you know, it doesn't match some of these other ones, maybe these. But these are uncarved, and this was maybe an attempt at carving, or I'm not sure. You can see how they all vary, right? Was this a later recarving, or just pieces that broke off? Why are they broken off, right? You know, it makes you wonder. So we're going to look at some more aqueducts coming up, and these are attributed to the Romans, but like we see in South America, there is like a very precision executed water. Okay, we need to stop after this one because the next one's pretty controversial. But I will say we see a lot of South American sites that implement like water, and you know, they're really, like, I believe Paiute we were talking about has a fountain made out of one block, like one stone, that when it rains, it's a model, and like it's like a city with animals, and it comes alive. You know, it looks like the whole city with the animals is flooding, and all the water pours out of the perimeter holes at once, creating a natural fountain. And they're very good at fountains and canals in South America. So there is a connection between being able to move water, so, and just, you know, to work with water. So that's a very interesting connection, and we might need to keep that in mind as a potential hallmark. So we'll stop it here because the next part I gotta explain. Okay, I want to get this one in this episode, because I think this one is the most controversial, perhaps, in the entire list. At this point in the research, it was like an Easter egg hunt. I was just searching old ruins and, you know, ancient ruins on Google Images, looking at, you know, largest images I could find, and just hunting down hallmarks. And I came to this picture and a couple other pictures just through that process. And when I looked further and found the location, I, of course, probably like all of you, are saying, no way. There is no possibility that this is before, you know, British settlers or even Spanish conquistadors. So let's look at this a little closer. There is a Reddit page, I believe, that we're going to look at in a minute. Yes, that talks about it. But I just wanted to present it and see what you guys think. Now, we see small filler stones. We see these little holes. They could be described as square holes. I'm not sure, right? Size of the, you know, sense of the scale. You can see all the little holes, anomalies. The upper piece, those appear to be bevel blocks, and you can see the irregularity again. Some are, you know, longer, others are shorter. There doesn't seem to be a pattern. These are all small. Why the variation, right? I see mortar. Now that should be a no-no right away, right? Is that I'm seeing mortar all around the edges here. But some of the angles, like perhaps polygonal and other pieces, I'm not sure about, right? So I'm really starting to question what I'm looking at. And then this is a picture from the Reddit page that I thought was actually pretty compelling. And I want to break this one down for you guys. So this is a relatively old bridge. You can tell by the rust. And you can see that there's a stark difference in the two stones here for the foundation of the trusses. Now, this is obviously newer, and even though this says new construction, but yes, this entire thing is a newer construction. But let's look at these blocks in relation to these other blocks. Now, yes, this is a definite new construction, as in 100% from new materials and, new formed. But these blocks look pretty old and look fairly similar to these blocks. And look at the legs. The legs are the same age. Yes, this is all aged and rusted and oxidized the same. You can even see the stain on these blocks. So this is all built at one time, no repairs. This is one go. But these were perhaps older blocks that were reutilized. Now this is a new stone. They wanted to make sure they had a new stone for the bottom of the leg because they didn't trust it maybe. But you can see up in the background too, new additions of the lighter grayer stone, older stone, and even the one he points out appears to be a bevel block, and these appear to have bevels. It's very strange. This might even be polygonal, right? But what is this doing in Jersey City, New Jersey? So I want to take a look at the Reddit page real quick because there's a picture in here. Now the discussion you can read for yourself. It's a pretty long discussion. But we're going to see if we can find a picture here that shows when they cut out a piece and what the underneath of this wall looks like. Look at this. This is a cutout they did for an additional structure or additional parking lot or, I don't know, foundation for something they're doing. But this is very interesting, right? It does look very well done. Now, I think I see mortar, and I think I see some rubble fill. But this is not a bad wall. And this makes a square. You'll have to look up the dimensions. But you can see they're actually even utilizing the part they cut as part of their new foundation. They're just tying into it with their concrete. You can see the original foundation comes across. Perhaps clamps. I'm not sure about some of that, but I'm not sure about some of that. Comes around and connects again. And again, you can see perhaps mortar, rubble, and fill. But it's still, the execution is pretty well done. And the attribution is to the railroad, I believe, the Pennsylvania Railroad. I find it interesting, this part that comes out, that curves around, what is that about, right? Is that original? Is that just a paver that drove through there? It might be a paver that drove through there. You never know. One of those little small portable graders or whatever you call them. But so this site, very controversial, and you can read for yourself in the article. But you can get a scale of how far it goes from one end. There's a space, and there's a little bit more of it. And then it goes around, forms a big square. So this one might be bogus, guys. Disclaimer, that one, I don't know if I can even find it if I zoom out. It's all the wooded area, basically. This is all built up around it. So, but I am no Chuck at this Google Earth stuff, so I'm not going to even try. But you guys tell me what you think about that. I find some of the hallmarks interesting. Maybe a legacy. If the Pennsylvania Railroad did build it, man, they knew what they were doing. And they were definitely just like the original builders of some of these structures that we're looking at. So I think we'll close it up there because we're getting long again, guys. But just want to throw this one in for your all's consideration, because if this one is bogus, I would like it off my list. Like if this was an older wall and then the Pennsylvania Railroad, maybe a few decades later built this and they had concrete and these are some kind of older stone and, I don't know. Help me out here. This one I'd like off my list if I could, because just don't know. But we'll stop it there. Thank you guys for hanging out with me this morning. Check out my other tabs, my channels tab and my playlist tab. and we'll talk to you next time.